Well, good morning, Spirit and Truth Sanctuary family. Happy Tuesday to everybody. I have the joy of the Lord this morning, and I'm sharing it with those who are around me, although at least 6 feet, some 60 feet away from me. And so I'm going to share a little joy with you every week that I get up to welcome you guys on Tuesday mornings. This paper right here is in my sister's notebook or folder that she brings to do her. I don't know if you can see that. The very top line says call Ben up. Can you guys see that? I don't know if you can see that or not. See, it says call Ben up. And so, as a child, we sang the song a lot. Call him up and tell him what you want. So I know my sister put this note in her notes years ago or months ago that Ben Mullins wanted to say something. Shout out to Ben and Vicky, by the way. And so she was reminding herself, allow Ben to come up and make an announcement, whatever. But when I see this every Tuesday morning, all I can think is that song, call him up. But if you confess the Lord, but we say, call Ben up, call Ben up and tell him what you want. Yes. And then right under that is a little bit more joy of the Lord. Look right under call Ben up. See that word there, B-R-O-B, brobe, B-R-O-B. So that is a short for the Bohemian Rhapsody of Blessing. And that may sound crazy, but there's a song that Queen is famous for called Bohemian Rhapsody. And it's just kind of a combination of rock and roll and opera and all this kind of craziness. And my sister let me hear it when I was a kid. I was like, what in the world is this crazy song? She's like, it's Bohemian Rhapsody. It's a little bit of everything. So our blessings on Tuesday morning are just every part of your body, your soul, your consciousness, your friends, your lawnmower, everything is blessed. So we started calling it the Bohemian Rhapsody of Blessing. So I always say, LaDonna, don't forget, it's important for our people. You need to give the brobe so that we're on the same wavelength. So this morning we're going to call Ben up and we're going to give you the brobe. So Lord, we thank you for joy, for life, for health, for laughter that is healing to our bodies and to our minds. We commit this day to you right now. In the name and nature of Jesus the Christ. They all would say amen and amen. You're going to have to call Ben up whether you want to or not.
It's all good. So now you are getting to know more and more. I would say that even though I have been married for 25 years, and it's getting close, but I probably have more inside jokes with my brother than any other human. It's like we can just say one word to each other, and we have but he's letting you in on a bunch of our into the world of our inside jokes. Okay, let's begin this morning with our brobe. Spirit of Truth, we come to you today to declare these intentions that we as a corporate body are focusing on this year. We have joyful, energetic bodies. We have loving, compassionate hearts. We have restful, alert minds, and we experience lightness of being in all things. It is our intention today and for the rest of this year to replace any resistance, disorder, effort, or struggle with gentleness, clarity, health, eagerness, love, joy, and freedom as our natural state. It is our prayer, our intention, and our heart's desire to be fully awake today and always. We believe it, we perceive it, and now we receive it in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen, and so it is. Excuse me, I had to have a little water. Okay, now on to our quotes. The first one, being positive in a negative situation is not naive, it's leadership. Next, living by example is always a better teacher than trying to preach. Don Cheadle said that. Next, be a living example of your values. Speak them, wear them, and most of all, make decisions completely aligned with them. People may doubt what you say, but they will believe what you do. Lewis Cass. And some of these I'm telling the author. If I don't know the author, I'm leaving it off. The example we set for our children by how we act when things don't go our way is much more important than the rules we set for them. Next, never separate the life you live from the words you speak. Paul Wellstone. If you would lift me up, you must be on higher ground. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that. And then Marcus Aurelius said, waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. And finally, nothing so conclusively proves a man or a woman's ability to lead others as what he or she does from day to day to lead him or herself. Thomas J. Watson. All right, I mentioned on Sunday as I was introducing the responsive reading that everybody wants to be spiritual, but that number decreases greatly when the proverbial rubber hits the road and you realize what you must do in order to be spiritual. And I gave 2 quotes on Sunday, which I'll repeat for you now. The first is by comedian Kevin Hart. He often says, everybody wants to be famous, nobody wants to do the work. The extended thought is nobody wants to do the work that it takes to be famous or to become famous. And then I quoted myself from an earlier teaching, which I believe was a teaching about the subject of death. And that quote is, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Another quote I've heard that goes along with these is, I'd do anything to lose 20 pounds except change my diet and exercise regularly. Which, obviously the irony is those are the 2 key things you have to do if you want to lose 20 pounds. So I talked several weeks ago about the difference between us, not the difference, but between us moving from the human to the divine, which is the ultimate goal for all of us. And I described 2 ways in which we can accomplish this, the easy way and the hard way. The hard way being crucifixion, which involves pain, struggle, sacrifice, and death. And the easy or easier way being transfiguration, which involves a shift in perspective about who you are and what you're capable of, realizing that you came here as a being of light, whole and complete in God's image, not as a sinner born in iniquity, in need of salvation by an external third party. So in light of that, some things I'm going to say today might seem to contradict that teaching. It might sound like I'm contradicting the whole notion that there is an easy or easier way, because I'm going to talk today about our actions and how important they are. Whereas for the last couple of teachings I've given, I know I've focused more on the being than the doing aspect of life. But all I can tell you is, once again, we've got to find the middle way. Being is not complete without doing, and vice versa. It's just that our current culture has been so fixated on the doing and has largely ignored and devalued the being for such a long time, so necessarily more emphasis on that needs to be put on the being right now, because that's where the deficiency is. If your body is deficient in vitamin D, it doesn't matter how much vitamin C or B12 you take, that's not going to do anything to help your vitamin D deficiency. So we've been deficient in our practice and in our emphasis on just being and staying present in the now. So that's what we need the biggest dose of to get our level back up to normal. But that doesn't mean we can neglect the other vitamins, because if we don't take them as well, then we'll become deficient in those areas. So although most of my teachings emphasize being, because that's what we're most deficient in right now, today I want to talk about doing, so that we can stay in balance, and it's not a contradiction at all. It is a complement to the other teachings. So we're so geared to this either or thinking as opposed to both and thinking, and we believe we must choose either one or the other, that we have to either always just be or we always have to do. But here on this earth realm, while we're down here in this world of duality, at least, we need to do both. We need to both be and do. So today we're going to focus on the doing part, which we're better at than the being part. But here's the thing. You can do a lot of work But if it's in service to the wrong goal, then it's wasted energy. Like that old illustration of climbing all the way to the top of the ladder only to realize that the ladder was up against the wrong building or the wrong wall. And I'm not talking about right and wrong here in the sense of some causes being right or more virtuous than others. I'm still all about non-judgment. I'm speaking more about your purpose, which is certainly different and distinct from other people's purpose. But whatever your particular purpose is in this life, there's an easy way to get there, and there's a more difficult or harder way to get there. There is a loving, higher consciousness way to get there, as well as a lower consciousness struggle way to get there. And in my opinion, at least, how you get there is just as important as getting there. So when I refer today to the ladder being up against the wrong wall, I'm talking about doing it the hard way, basically, or unnecessary action. It's not that action or the act of doing in and of itself is either right or wrong, as in doing versus being, one is better than the other. It's that some action is necessary and other action is unnecessary, which makes life harder. Today we're going to focus on action that is necessary because it contributes to the process of how you determine what lens you're going to look through. I want to go back now and repeat a few lines from that teaching from a few weeks ago that I mentioned earlier. I said, "So who has convinced us that suffering is holy and that struggle is necessary?" I also want to interject here that action and struggle are not the same thing. Struggle is difficult, painful action, but right action, necessary action, is enjoyable. Those two words are not synonymous. Okay, so who has convinced us that suffering is holy and that struggle is necessary? I said, the church or religion has, through all of those crucifixes and paintings of the bloodied, tortured, helpless, victimized Jesus on the cross. That's why we have come to believe that we too should expect to be helpless and bloodied and tortured and victimized, and that only after that, only after a painful death, can we attain or regain our status as a powerful, transcendent being of life. William Henry, which is a man that I quoted a lot during that during that teaching, William Henry's whole point that he was making, that I was talking about, is that if we could just concentrate, emphasize, and meditate a little more on the transfiguration process, we could be totally different people and have a totally different experience here on earth. Again, as I said earlier, there are two ways we can change or evolve while we're here on earth. One is the easy way, and one is the hard way. Which way that is determined by what lens we choose to look through. Okay, so if, as I said in the passage from that earlier teaching, it all depends on the lens we choose, then how do we go about choosing the lens that leads to the easy way? And again, easy doesn't mean action-free. It doesn't mean that you have to do absolutely nothing. It just means struggle-free, which we've already established are two different things. The action or the doing we're going to talk about today is about getting us to that lens, the one through which we can be transfigured rather than crucified. Make sense? Okay. But before we dive into some actions that we can take or the need to take action, I want to say one more thing about these lenses. I've said this many times before that we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Similarly, we don't read the Bible or hear a sermon or see a situation as it is. We see all those things as we are because we're looking through a specific or particular lens. I gave this teaching today a dual title on purpose to make a point. In case you didn't already see it pop up when you opened up whatever it is method means by which you're seeing me, my title today is Let Me Be Spiritual / the weapons of our warfare. Either of those titles would have worked by themselves for today, but I want you to stop for a minute and just observe yourself. If you were scrolling on Facebook or YouTube for something to watch and you hadn't specifically tuned in to hear my teaching today, which of those titles would appeal most to you? The one about being spiritual or the one that mentions weapons and warfare? That will tell you a lot about which lens you're looking at life through right now, and we'll get further into that later. But now I want to give you some excerpts from an interview I watched with a man named Jack Canfield, who some of you will recognize as the author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series that was very successful. He was also one of the co-authors of the book, and he was in the movie The Secret. And he talks here about finding your purpose and the importance of action in pursuit of that purpose. He says, I used to define success as being able to produce any result you wanted, whether it was good health, a great relationship, or whatever. But recently, I've been defining it as fulfilling your soul's purpose. If you come here and make a lot of money, but you don't fulfill your soul's purpose, it's like going to France to see the Eiffel Tower, but never making it to Paris. I really think we are all born with a purpose, and our job, if you will, is to discover what that is and then find ways to manifest it through our work, through our relationships, and anything else we do. I'm still a big believer in setting goals, but I believe the goals need to be aligned with your purpose. Okay, time out here. Here's where the ladder on the wall illustration comes in. If your goals are not aligned with your soul's purpose for being here, then they're kind of meaningless. Any goal that doesn't get you further toward your soul purpose is having your ladder on the wrong wall. He continues, what I have found is that when you are involved in activities that light you up, that bring you great joy, things that make you feel excited and expansive, it may look to others like you're just doing it for you, but the fact is you are actually being of service to others because it's putting you in a very high vibration, which only helps all those around you. And then he talked for a minute about his wife, who doesn't have a formal job where she makes money, but he calls her, he says that her whole life's purpose is to be a day maker. And I loved that concept. He said, whoever she comes in contact with, interacts with, talks to on the phone with, sends an email to, she makes their day. And so that's her life's purpose. And she has discovered that. And so that's where she puts all of her energy, is making people's day, whether she makes money at it or not. He says, joy is our inborn guidance system that tells us when we're on track with our purpose. When you find the thing that brings you the greatest joy, you will naturally be of service to others. But it doesn't mean there's no action or work involved on your part. Some people who watched the movie or read the book The Secret mistakenly took away the message, all I have to do is sit in my room and visualize a Mercedes, and somehow one will materialize in my driveway and someone will knock on my door and hand me the keys. That could happen, but it's unlikely. You have to go and do things that produce the car. Maybe get a job if you don't have one. Now, visualization is great and will certainly lead you to ideas, resources, and possibilities. But part of believing is taking action. In fact, taking action demonstrates your belief in something. I would say, obviously, if you don't believe in a certain medicine, you're not going to take it. So your action is always led by your belief. He says, as humans, we usually don't take action on things we don't believe in or on things we don't believe are possible. So when we do take action on something, it signals to the universe that we believe it's possible. And that raises the vibration and begins the process of the universe working with us to make it happen. That's what the law of attraction is, in my opinion. That's him. So basically what he's saying here is that the universe is intelligent, and it's not going to waste its time trying to help you with something that you don't even believe is possible, because Here's another beautiful, accurate quote. Whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you are correct. So much of what we accomplish depends on our belief that we can. So now that we've established that action or work isn't a dirty word because it's not the same thing as struggle, let's go back now to something else he mentioned. First, he said, you have to find your life's purpose. That's why we're all here. And I'm pretty sure that most of you, especially if you're watching me today, believe that at least part of your purpose here on earth is to be a spiritual person, or that your spirituality should grow while you're here, or that being a spiritual person will enhance or help you achieve whatever your life's purpose is. And another thing he said is this: when you are involved in activities that light you up, that bring you great joy, things that make you feel excited and expansive, it increases your vibration. I want to talk for a minute about this word expansive. What makes you feel more expansive? When you have a conversation with someone and what they say makes your spiritual baby jump inside you, and you realize that you're on the same wavelength as them, and maybe even that whatever you're saying to them is bringing them, contributing to their joy or making their life better or helping their well-being? Or does that make you feel expansive? Or when you have a conversation with someone where all you do is argue with them and pick apart things that they have said or that they believe in and prove through your argument how wrong they are and how right you are? Which one makes you feel expansive, and which one makes you contract or go into your little shell and shift into attack mode? Honestly, some people may prefer to argue. Being right and proving someone else wrong may really light some people up, and obviously it does because there's a whole lot of it going on. But if that's true for you, then you can't also say that you want to be a spiritual person, because that does not align with being spiritual. So if you claim you want to be spiritual, what is the lens you need to be looking through? Fortunately, we have some handy-dandy song lyrics that will tell us exactly what that answer is. We sang it, in fact, this past Sunday. It starts out by setting or establishing the foundation, by telling us who we are. It says, you're not a natural being having a spiritual experience, but you are a spiritual being living this natural experience. So we talked about this a few weeks ago. We decided when we were in the realm of spirit and oneness to come down to earth and to be born into a human body so that we could have the experience of being human, a natural experience. All right, so that's the being part. What about the doing part? If you want to be spiritual while you are living and walking out this natural experience on earth, if we want to look at life through a spiritual lens, what must we do? What action must we take? Continuing on with the song now. Every day, not one time and then forget, not one time coming down to an altar and then forget about it. Every day, when you wake, your confession should constantly say, "Oh Lord, let me be spiritual." Okay, so what does that mean? What is the definition of what our confession should be in order to be spiritual? It tells you in the very next line: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, and temperance. Let me live in the Spirit. Let me be spiritual. Okay, so the state of being called spiritual requires doing the action of demonstrating those things in your life that I just listed. Simple, right? Simple, but not easy, especially in the climate we're in right now, and where so many people are looking through the lens of warfare and fighting. So now that we've heard it in song form, what does the Bible say? Galatians 6:1, brothers and sisters, if someone is overtaken in any wrongdoing, you who are spiritual, restore such a person with a gentle spirit, watching out for yourselves so that you also won't be tempted. Carry one another's burdens. In this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. If you think you are better than others when you really aren't, you are wrong and you deceive yourself. Let each person examine his own work, and then he can take pride in himself alone and not compare himself with someone else. That was verses 1 through 4 from the Christian Standard Bible. I didn't put this in my notes, but I want to stop and give you another little joy of the Lord. That part that said, if you believe you are better than others when you really aren't. We had a friend one time who went to this little bitty Pentecostal church in Alabama, and it was just a part of their service that people would get up and give words. So there was kind of a rivalry between the Baptist church, or it wasn't Baptist, whatever, Pentecostal churches. There was kind of a rival between two churches in the little town, and most of the wealthier people went to one, and then the poorer people went to the other. So one day, a member of the poorer church went over to the richer church specifically to stand up and give a word of the Lord, in which he said, "Come ye down off your high horse, ye who think ye are better than everyone else, 'cause ye ain't. Thus saith the Lord." So I just remember when he told us that story, that was some joy of the Lord. I really, that's one of the services I wish I could have been in. Okay, so if everyone were spiritual according to that definition that we just read in Galatians, the whole internet just might shut down because there'd be nothing to say except maybe, how can I help you along your journey? What can I do to encourage you today? What burden of yours may I help you carry? Just imagine if everybody on Facebook who claims to be spiritual actually were. Okay, so that's what the Bible and Christianity says about being spiritual. But what about other religions or philosophies? What is their version and definition of being spiritual? I want to look for a minute at yoga. A lot of people think yoga is only a practice of physical poses, but that's only part of it. There is a whole philosophy behind yoga, and one of its most important principles is called ahimsa, which means non-violence. So the information I'm going to give you now comes from a man named Nikolai Bachman. He says, if we truly understand that we are all the result of our past experiences and believe there's a divine inner awareness within each person, then we will stop blaming others and begin to act with loving kindness, even toward those we do not get along with. So, if spirituality is your lens, this is what you must do. No matter what religion we practice, offensive violence, which I guess he's making a distinction here between offensive and defensive violence, offensive violence toward others is unacceptable. It's important that a person's basic human rights are honored. There are many causes of violence. Okay, so now he's going to get into why we're sometimes violent, or the things that block us from being spiritual. Two big causes of violence are attachment and desire, which are both related to fear. Attachment and desire are two sides of the same coin. There's a word in Sanskrit called raga, which is translated as the dual sensation of attachment and desire. In the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about the real enemy not being other people, but the concept of raga. When you are attached to something to the degree that you're afraid to lose it, this can cause violence to arise. So I want to make a little side note here that this is also a product of whatever lens it is you're looking through. If you tend to look through the lens of love, then you see the world as abundant, and therefore you are not afraid of letting things go, because you not only believe that there's enough for everyone, but you believe that there's an endless supply, that there's always going to be more of whatever it is you want or need where that came from. You aren't afraid of losing it, and therefore you're not overly attached to it. If you tend to look through the lens of fear, on the other hand, you have a scarcity mentality, and you feel like you've got to hang on to every little thing and protect it so that other people won't try to get it. let's not let all these foreigners into our country because there's not enough for all of us. They're taking away our jobs. They're taking away our health care. Their kids are taking up spaces in our schools. There's not enough for them and us too. Do you see what separation and scarcity mentality looks like and feels like, how contracting that is? And that often leads to violence because it sets up an us against them and a we can't let them get what belongs to us mentality. Let's go back to Nikolai. The ego is the part of us that likes to hold on to things. It likes to be in control. Yoga helps us keep our ego in check. There's nothing wrong with having a desire. There's nothing wrong with satisfying it. But if for some reason you can't, you should be able to cope with it and be okay. It shouldn't knock you off your center. Yoga teaches us to separate the actor from the action in order to avoid violence. Okay, so here he's giving us a how-to. This is something we can do, an action we can take in order to be more spiritual. He says Mahatma Gandhi was a big proponent of ahimsa. He said, man and his deeds are two distinct things. It is quite proper to resist and attack a system, but to resist and attack its author is tantamount to resisting and attacking oneself. To slight a single human being is to slight the divine power within us, and thus harms not only that being, but with him the whole world. All right, we've talked about this principle before too. I don't remember the exact quote from a teaching, but I do remember quoting a man named Timothy Holleran maybe a couple years ago that he was basically saying the same thing, that what we should be going to war with is not people, but ideologies and systems. That's what we should be standing up to, not individual people, because people can change their ideology and the systems that they support and believe in. They do it all the time. How many times have you changed what you believe over the course of your life? That's what we do. That's what we came here to do, to evolve and change and grow. So let's not fight people. If we must fight, let's make sure we're fighting systems and ideologies. And to do that, we must learn to separate them from people as much as possible, which again, simple, not easy. Back to Nikolai. Remember that all of us act based on our past experience and habitual patterns. The next time you have a violent or negative thought towards someone, take a step back and see if you can put yourself in their shoes, perhaps with our little practice that we've talked about, just like me. We are 100% responsible for our own thoughts, our own words, and our own actions. It's our choice what we do. Choosing ahimsa, nonviolence, is the foundation upon which all the other principles of yoga are based. So, that is the spiritual basis or foundation of yoga, nonviolence. And as I was just saying on Sunday, there's such a feeling of conflict and argument and war in the atmosphere right now. It's becoming increasingly harder to remain spiritual in the face of so much disharmony and polarization. But as I also said on Sunday, this is the perfect time for those of us who consider ourselves to be spiritual to put our money where our mouth is. This is the time where we really need to walk our talk. It's easy to be spiritual when there's no conflict. It's easy to be spiritual inside the walls of a church or an ashram or a temple, or a monastery. But can you remain spiritual in the marketplace, on Facebook, in traffic? Or do you resort to arming yourself? Listen to that wording that a lot of people use, arming yourself with the word so you can retaliate when someone uses Scripture or their interpretation of Scripture against you. You see, that's why we can't use the Bible as our filter, because you can prove pretty much any point you want to prove with Scriptures from the Bible and then turn right around and prove the exact opposite with different Scriptures from the same Bible. So the Bible can't be our filter. It alone can't be the lens that we look through. Love itself is the only thing that can be our lens. If it's not based on or coming from or producing love, it's not spiritual. That's plain and simple. So 2 things I want us all to remember, and I say all because I am preaching to myself today as much as I am to anyone else. While I was preparing for this yesterday, I got into a disagreement. I won't call it an argument, but it was definitely a difference of opinion with someone on Facebook about President Trump. And I know better. I have told y'all not to do that. But it's so easy right now to allow yourself to be provoked, to take that bait, and to forget that people are more important than ideologies, and that the most basic thing we are asked to do as a spiritual being who claims to follow Christ is to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And there are no qualifications that are put on that, not just our neighbors who think like us and vote like us. So, 2 things for us, including me, to remember. 1, if we must arm ourselves, if we just have to fight, number 1, remember to fight against systems and not people. Systems can and should be scrapped and destroyed if they are bad or unjust. But people can always and should always be salvaged and redeemed, even if they have fallen prey to believing in a bad system. The key to that mentality is always there, but for the grace of God go I. If I hadn't come in contact with the information I've come in contact with, I might be believing that same thing. Number 2, if we're going to fight, remember what the Bible says about the weapons of our warfare. 1 Corinthians 10:3-5 from the NIV. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. In the King James, this is where it says the weapons of our warfare are not carnal. They're not of the flesh. So what are they? They're spiritual, which is what we're talking about today. On the contrary, they, speaking of our spiritual weapons, which we know from our little song, are love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, meekness, and temperance. They, those things, have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments. Notice it doesn't say there we demolish others with our arguments, but we demolish arguments themselves, and every pretension, in the King James it says every high thing that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. Or in some translations, it just says that sets itself against God, which I interpret as love. God is love, right? So our weapons, those things that are divine and spiritual and not carnal, demolish every high thing that sets itself against love. Like I said before, if it's not based on, coming from, or producing love, it is not spiritual. That is the lens. So the verse ends this way, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. Because if we catch it while it's still just a thought, then it won't come out of our mouth and it won't become an action. So how do we do this, especially when we're really, really, really angry? How do we shift ourselves to a place where we are able to see through the lens of love and spirituality, even when we're angry? I want to read now from a talk given by a man named Rupert Spira, who gives us some tools to use when we're angry. He does this in the context of a conference he's leading, and a gentleman has come up to the microphone during a question and answer session and is asking, he says, I'm very angry right now, I'm triggered. How do I work with myself with this anger? And this is a little bit of a lengthy back and forth, but I'll quickly go through it because I want you to see the process he takes this man through, which I think is brilliant. He says there are 2 approaches, and for the first one, we're going to explore the statement, I am angry. First, you must explore the I that is angry. Who is this I? Don't pay attention to the anger. You want to focus on the one who is angry, the one around whom the anger revolves, the one on whose behalf the anger has arisen. When you say, I have been slighted by someone, I have been ignored by someone, I have been disrespected by someone, whatever the trigger was, who are you referring to? And the gentleman pauses and says, I am the being of the sensation. He says, I am the being aware of the sensation of anger. Okay, so I have a feeling this is not this guy's first time at a spiritual conference. This ain't his first time at the rodeo. He knows enough already to say, I am the being aware of this sensation I am feeling of anger, or of this thought I'm having of anger. And so Rupert responds, perfect, you are aware. What you are aware of doesn't concern us at the moment. We want to know about the I, because you said, I am angry. So I want to know about the I, not the anger. So you are a being who is aware. You must remember that what you are aware of is not yourself. Tell us more about yourself. And then the man says, and I thought it was interesting here that he shifted from saying I to it's. He said, it's empty and spacious, but filled with. And Rupert interrupts him here and says, don't worry about what it's filled with, because what it's filled with comes and goes. So remember what I said earlier. Our beliefs and the systems and ideologies that we support change. They come and they go. That's the same idea he's talking about here. He then says, the I is the empty container of whatever you choose to fill it with. What did my brother talk about on Sunday? We were created to be creators. Whatever we say our I is, that's what it is. And God, source, universe, respects that because he, she, it respects us as the creator we are and respects our creation. So he goes on speaking to the man and he says, given that you've looked at yourself and said, I am a being that is aware of my thoughts, and I have a thought of anger, but that thought is just something I've chosen to allow into the container of who I am and is something that is objectively able to come and go. Would you still make the statement, I am angry? And the man takes a deep breath and then answers, no. And Rupert says, so the statement, I am angry, is not quite true, is it? It's only true because you are looking at it through this fuzzy old lens of how you have been conditioned to respond when a thought triggers you. If you had let that thought run, or in other words, if you had not caught it or taken it captive, like we just read in the Bible, if you had not done that, you might have started some kind of conflict with whoever it was that triggered that thought in you. But when you don't follow the anger or even focus on the anger, but rather focus on the I and ask yourself, who is the I that is angry? And indeed, is what I am truly angry? When you trace it back, it usually dissolves rather quickly because you've separated your thoughts from who you are. That's one approach. Another approach would be not to turn away from the anger and investigate the self, but instead to turn toward the anger or into the feeling of the anger, not the thought that caused it or the story of he or she did such and such to me, but the raw experience itself, which is an experience you are having in your body. So that's what he's talking about. How do you know when you're angry? Because your body's telling you you're angry. In this method, you disconnect from the storyline and focus on the actual sensation of the anger the story is causing in your body. Tell us about that sensation. And the man says, there's heat. And Rupert says, don't think about anything that's associated with the heat now, because that's an avoidance of the experience itself. We often escape the experience of anger through thinking. We want to do the opposite here. We don't want to escape it by thinking either about where it came from or what we might want to do in response. We want to go toward the feeling of it. Is the heat pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? And at that point, the man was completely honest, which kind of blew me away. And I could tell that the rest of the people in the audience were blown away because you could kind of hear a little audible gasp when he said, It's neutral to pleasant. He was honest. So, so he said, so let me find where I am. Okay, so the reason that surprised me so much is because we're taught that anger is not supposed to be pleasant. But here, he's not really exploring his anger in the sense that it's connected to the story that caused it. He's only exploring the sensation it has caused. So Rupert has already asked the man to put the story aside and just focus on the feeling, the physical sensation it has caused. And the man honestly answers that it feels neutral to pleasant to him. Why? Because the physical sensation is the feeling of that emotion moving through him. It's not the emotion itself. The anger is not what feels pleasant. The sense of it moving through him, hopefully to soon be released, is what is feeling pleasant to him. Our bodies are so very intelligent. They were designed so perfectly. They try to help us out like this all the time, but as Rupert says, we usually mess it up by escaping from it into thought. We go up here into our mind instead of just sitting with it in our heart until our heart deals with it. So then he keeps working with the guy for a few more minutes, and he keeps asking him questions about how he's feeling physically and the sensations he's experiencing. And the man describes a tingling in his chest, in his upper body, and an adrenaline rush and an intensity. And Rupert keeps asking him the question, and does this feel unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral? And the man gives him his answers. And finally, Rupert says, so the actual physical sensations you're experiencing, you have described as either neutral or on the pleasant side of neutral. You haven't as yet described anything as unpleasant or negative or frightening. So where is the anger in this experience? Where is the negative emotion coming from which you are trying to get away from? And he replies, it's not in my experience. It's in the story. And Rupert says, yes, but you've already taken care of the story in the first part of the exercise. The protagonist in the story is the I we have already looked at. Without the I, the story cannot stand. And when you saw the I as your eternal, timeless self, who is only a container of thoughts, or we might say an observer of thoughts, you realized that your true self was not angry, didn't you? And the man answers, yes. And Rupert continues, so we've already explored the story and concluded that the anger has not harmed your true self. Your body is only dealing now with the residue of the experience, a kind of tension which you have described as not unpleasant. And we know that it's only the mechanism the body uses to allow that emotion to dissolve and flow through us. Is that right? And Rupert and the man says, yes, that's right. And then Rupert asks again, so are you angry? And the man says, no. And Rupert ends with these very wise words. Your suffering cannot stand this kind of investigation. Your suffering can only exist if it is not clearly seen. That is why at every turn, the mind will try to escape into thinking, into justifying the feeling, into returning to the story, because this keeps our suffering in a murky, half-seen state where it can thrive as if in some sort of twilight zone. But what it cannot survive is the clear light of our awareness. Wow, wow, wow. That whole process that he just went through is amazing. That was necessary action because it served to switch that gentleman's lens, and more importantly, it reminded him that he had the power to choose what lens he was viewing, in this case his anger, through. And when he shifted his focus to a different lens, everything about what he thought he saw and felt changed. The very powerful spiritual weapon he used here was the light of awareness. He said, our suffering cannot survive it, because in that light we see that our true self has not been harmed. Beautiful, just beautiful. So speaking of beautiful, I want to end by reading from a piece by a woman named Lori Ladd. We talk a lot here about Earth and our lifetime here being a time and a place of duality. And I often speak about this almost a little bit negatively. But as we've learned here at Connection, there's always two sides to a coin. And yes, there is a negative side to duality. But here, she points out a positive aspect of the concept of duality, how it gives us as humans the ability to be here as spiritual beings having and living a natural experience, while at the same time remembering that we are also a part of and still connected to a higher consciousness and to that realm of oneness. And because of this duality, we can experience both at the same time and actually bring one into another. As above, so below. On earth, as it is in heaven. In our imagination, as in manifestation. We are the vehicles through which this is accomplished. So she says, our bodies, our physical forms are standing in a three-dimensional field here on the earth, which provides us with a certain consciousness to experience. Here we are divided by polarity. Good, bad, right, wrong. We have opinions and personal truths. There's all kinds of chaos and external manipulation going on, and we are here in the middle of it all. So we're going to have emotions, thoughts, and beliefs about all of it. There's nothing wrong with having opinions, even strong opinions about what's going on and about what we are experiencing. There's nothing wrong with getting angry and upset about it. But here's the thing. There is also an aspect of us that is able to stretch up to the eternal realm in an entirely different dimension of consciousness. When we are able to tap into that, we feel joy, peace, love, unity, expansion, and freedom. That sounds a whole lot like our list that we just talked about being spiritual. Even as our bodies are anchored in this very intense three-dimensional matrix, we're still able to tap into our higher self and bring that down into our physical body. The question is, how often in your now moment can you begin to observe and be aware of standing in this physical space where you can see, feel, and touch everything and watch yourself respond to it, but also connect to the higher realm and respond just a little bit differently? For example, if I come across somebody in the supermarket or at the gym and there is a discussion or a divide or a disagreement of some kind, if I only respond from my lower earth plane self, I may have a knee-jerk reaction and engage in an argument. But if in that now moment I can pull down into this realm my higher consciousness self, I may all of a sudden open my heart up and say, I love you, it's all good. Or, as I said on Sunday, I challenged people to say, I love you more than this argument. I love you more than being right or proving my point. But I was talking about with someone you already know and love. She's taken it to a different level here about somebody she just met that's a stranger, that she's to tell them that she loves them and show them that same love. She continues, the more we're able to do this, the faster we're going to be able to shift the entire human collective. The more we choose to act from our higher self and from that level of consciousness, the faster we will make the shift. We have to start becoming the observers and to choose to respond from that higher realm. That's how we really impact our world. And I would act, that's how you really become spiritual. It's easy sometimes to forget who we are and why we're here. In this field of duality, we can get lost and we can get confused. But as we constantly, courageously choose to shine our own light as often as we can, pulling ourselves out of the three-dimensional matrix and choosing to remember that the old ways of doing things that may feel comfortable are not why we're here on earth. We came to earth to move into a higher state of consciousness, or as I've said, to move from human to divine. We came to earth to see ourselves as both human and as a being of light. We are here on this earth to shine our light, and the power of our holy light that vibrates at a heavenly frequency, when we allow it to, will destroy, melt, disintegrate, and dissolve any lower consciousness in its path. That's how powerful we are as beings of light in physical form. We must always allow ourselves to have compassion for our own humanness, for our anger and our rage at times. But our weapon is our light, and we must choose to shine it at every opportunity, especially those that on this three-dimensional plane we cannot stand. We don't need to suffer anymore. There is no need for us to be in pain or torture. If we want to see greed, manipulation, and suffering of every kind end, this is how we do it. We dissolve it by shining our light on it. So remember who you are, and remember the power of your light. It's the strongest weapon we possess. I could not have said it any better. Amen?
That was just delicious, and a lot of food was offered to us today. Wow, and balance with it. I was, as LaDonna was speaking, sometimes we understand information on different levels of thought progression, and the higher, I think, levels of understanding this is that we don't have to argue. You just have to be you. And your natural vibration is just going to kind of vibrate people away from you and attract other people to you. I think the question that we were presented with today is, if you are attracting arguments to yourself, are you really on as high of a vibration as you think you are? And so, yes, you may understand a different level of the political realm, the religious landscape of the nation. All that's wonderful. But if you're still in the vibration of conflict, you're going to continue to attract argument to yourself instead of just naturally allowing the vibration to push some people away from you, attract other people to you. And so we give thanks for all of it today. And I will encourage everybody to get out there and vote, whether you do early voting, whether absentee ballots, mail in, however you do it. Wait till the day of election. Take some water with you. Take a little snack with you, whatever. You might be waiting for a minute, but let your voice be heard. Everybody vote. Let's all covenant together to make sure that Spirit and Truth Sanctuary is a voting sanctuary. We have a lot of opinions. Let's back up our opinions with our vote, and so we encourage you to do that and to be safe. Take your mask with you. Try to stay socially distanced from people who are voting. None of us know where people are coming and going, so there's no reason to be fearful, but to be safe as you go out and vote. Did want to give some shouts out to everybody today. Look at the first name on this. The first names, LaDonna, on the shouts out are Ben and Vicki Mullins. It was the first name we said today. Call Ben up and tell him what you want. And so we give shout out to Ben and Vicki. We love you guys. Miss Emma, Sheila, Callie, Reverend David Michael, Megan, Alita, Terry, Laverne, Roberta, Elaine, Dr. Elijah, Richard, Pastor Gloria, Bobby, Terry, Olivia, the Sauce Man. He checks us out Wednesday nights and Tuesdays now. Miss Susan Anderson, Cindy Holt. And I think that's all we were able to do. Please forgive us. We were trying to get names from both live stream, Facebook, and YouTube today, which can be a little confusing going back and forth with all those things. But we love you guys. We miss you so much. We know that you're staying safe and healthy. Thank you for tuning in with us this morning. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow night as we continue our journey in the power of now. And then again, Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Have a great week. Go in peace, and may God bless you.